Today's episode is brought to you by Freedom Project Academy. Looking for a K-12 classical online school built on Judeo-Christian values? FPA is enrolling now for the fall. Request your free information packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedom, F-O-R, school.com.
It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am Dr. Duke, and I am again joined by David Fiorazo. But before we get started, look, this is serious. On Friday the 22nd, we stop enrolling for Freedom Project. This is a complete classical Judeo-Christian education from kindergarten to high school. We have live teachers teaching your kids. This is a wonderful escape from the public schools. And why does Friday, July 22nd matter? You got a couple days left to enroll if you want to be part of this. And just remember, please just remember, states like California and New York are already talking about bringing masks and vaccine mandates back. You've got school teachers unions all across the country demanding vaccines and masks in the fall. Remember what happened last year? 10 days before school started, they put the masks back. They required the vaccines. Do you understand what that means? A lot of you came to Freedom Project. A lot of you pulled your kids out of school at the last minute. It's going to happen again, it looks like. So that gives you a couple days to think about this. Don't be left on the outside of Freedom Project when the tyrants at the federal government come after your kids again. And so, in order to be able to do what you need to do, go to Freedom for School, that's freedom, F-O-R, school.com, and get started. You only have a little time left. We begin today in Florida, and another one of those stories. We had a dad show up at a school board meeting. He had actual books, actual quotes from books that are in the libraries for middle and high school kids, sometimes being read in the classroom. He tried to read out loud the pornographic nature of some of those books, and he was completely cut off. His mic was cut. They lectured him about how evil this transmission of pornography is, even as the school decided that we're going to keep the books in the classrooms, but a full-grown adult can't quote from them. Take a look at the video.
This issue started to get really public following the June 30th Clay School Board meeting when a Middleburg father tried to read excerpts from a book he says was on the shelf at the Fleming Island High School Library.
I'm going to stop you right there, sir. I'm going to stop you right there.
Turn the microphone off.
Turn off his microphone, please. I've told you I'm stopping you. The reason I'm stopping you is because these meetings are, if you'll hush your mouth for a minute and listen instead of just talking, you may learn something.
The school board lawyer tried to shut him down from speaking because he didn't want any sort of pornographic or potentially obscene material streamed over their YouTube channel to the public. I spoke with the father, Bruce Friedman, who's been interviewed by national media outlets over this. He read us some excerpts from one book called Lucky by Alice Sebold, which we can't air on TV. The book involves a woman's graphic retelling of a sexual assault.
They're trying to sexualize and normalize deviant behavior. Sexualizing our children is grooming. It is not acceptable. It is illegal. The lawyer wasn't concerned about that. He was concerned about being embarrassed if I read some bad words.
A group called Moms for Liberty has spearheaded these efforts, targeting specific books, and says they've identified 26 books in the library that they deem inappropriate. Only 1 or 2 have been removed so far. That includes an illustrated book called Gender Queer, which contains sexual depictions drawn inside. But I sat down with school board member Janice Karakas, who says this is being overblown, and Clay has a system in place to report inappropriate material in the school library.
And you think it's misinformation?
Absolutely. I think we have a process in place that, when something is brought to our attention, if it's a book in the media center, it will immediately be removed.
But you have not removed them. And you won't even let a dad talk about it. And how galling is it? How irrationally galling is it as taxpayers that dad gets 3 minutes to address the school board. And after 15 seconds, a smug lawyer tells him to hush his mouth and learn something from me. Absolutely unacceptable. What I don't understand, and I just don't understand this, why, Dad, are you leaving your kids in those schools? I get it. You are a warrior. You are a champion. You're trying to tell the truth. Get your kid out. Don't be talked to by these kind of lying bureaucrats. You've got a process, we're told by the lady at the end there. Ooh, wonderful how that process works when it never removes the books. It just removes parental criticism. That's all it does.
I want to read a quote from the end of the article. Leading up to it, it says, no good comes from this poison, and thank God Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is helping us get it out. He said, the destruction of the nuclear family is one of their goals. Anything that sterilizes children, weakens the family, or otherwise overwhelms and burdens society to the point where people would be desperate and would fall naturally to rely on their government is their goal. Their further goal is power. Power over the parents, power over their children, end quote. So, Dr. Duke, why in probably most high school or junior high libraries across the country are there this many of these books that when a parent finds out about it, then they say, well, wait a minute, this is offensive. How did they get in the libraries in the first place?
Well, the first thing that happened back in the Common Core days, and nobody wants to talk about this, is they eliminated all the classics. 2,000 years of wonderful books, from the Odyssey all the way through Shakespeare, all the way through Dickens and Mark Twain, all of it went. Because Western culture was racist, we were told. Okay, so you got rid of all of the great literature of Western culture, none of which contained this kind of garbage. So you got to fill the gap somehow. And just notice what happened, right? So they get rid of all Western books, all the great Western books, the classics, and all of a sudden, into the void, it just happened randomly, right, Dave? A bunch of radical lefties from Planned Parenthood, from LGBT activist
Human
groups,
rights campaign.
suddenly, they were there writing their own books. Yeah. And what have they replaced Shakespeare and Dickens with? With left-wing, radical, pornographic, gay, and rape sex. That's what they've done. This is not an accident. They got rid of the wholesome books of Western culture that unified people for 2,000 years, and they replaced it with smut to push a political agenda.
So the dad said to Fox News, these books are so vile that reading any excerpt that I captured will end this interview. And it would have. On Fox News, would have cut him off. He said somebody failed drastically in their mission to protect children. And he also said, he will protect his son from groomers and pedophiles and twisted, sick people that think these books are okay to present to a child. But Duke, you mentioned it. Get out of the system. Yeah. Get out of those schools, because they're in the libraries, they're in the curriculum.
Yeah, let me finish with this quote. As heroic as this man is, Friedman became an advocate to protect children in schools from curricula he deems poison because, quote, he has skin in the game. He wants his 15-year-old son to be in the public school system and come home unharmed. I'm sorry, sir, Mr. Friedman, you cannot have both of those things. You cannot have your kids in the public school and not to be harmed by this. And I would think at this point that lesson should be so clear, crystal clear to you, that you remove your kid immediately.
With all the censorship taking place on social media platforms, we've made it easy to keep up with your favorite content. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app in your app store. Get access to 18 new videos a week, plus thousands of archived shows, lecture series, and educational animations. Download the Freedom Project Media app on your Apple TV, Roku, tablet, or phone, and make sure you allow for notifications to keep you informed.
Well, let's move to Oregon. I mean, no. I didn't mean I want to move to Oregon, but that's where this next story is taking place. And they just voted, who's they? A school district to keep a pornographic book available for children. Now, apparently this is in the library, And Salem Kaiser School District in Oregon, they've been in hot water a little bit, not really, after parents discovered that genderqueer was available in the school library. Oh my goodness, as we often say on this show, parents were shocked to find out that these books were, I'm sorry guys, this is just, Duke, I hate to be redundant. If you're still shocked when you hear something is in the school library, in your child's curriculum, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say anymore at this point.
So moms and dads freaked out, they protested, and there was a process, just like in the last story we saw, there's a process. That process always results not in removing bad books, but censoring and shaming parents who complain. Same thing happened here. Quote, this now, genderqueer, show the cover again, Mike. Take a look at this real quick. There's the cover. We've talked about this a lot. Mike, show some of the imagery. This is what, we censored it. We blacked it out. But you've got on the left there, boys having sex. You have a young boy on his knees performing oral sex. You can see what's happening here. This is no run-of-the-mill book that has it's not two gay boys falling in love. This is about, like everything else in the LGBT community, it's about sex. Now, here's what the school said after all the protesting. The book will be necessary to keep in schools to help be more inclusive and allow all students from the LGBTQ community to have a resource. What do you need to have a sex manual for? You don't have any books in your curriculum where heterosexual people are engaging in that kind of cartoon drawings. You just don't have it. So what are you telling us here, right? That the only way we can include LGBT kids in education is through pornography? Again, what kind of attitude? How is it that you lefties see minority gay people as just machines who are only having sex? There's no other higher virtues or relationships you could find? I mean, this is the worst kind of bigotry, all done in the name of poisoning not just LGBT kids, but all kids in these public schools.
There it is, Suzanne West. She's the director of strategic initiatives, and she serves a key role in crafting and developing strategies that support the district's movement to become a more anti-racist and anti-oppressive school system. Duke, you already read the words inclusive. They want to be more inclusive. Also, we're talking about diversity. We're talking about, quote, the book expands on sexual orientation and gender identity, which are both topics touched on in wellness. So are they talking about health?
And we're back to social emotional learning. Look, if you think you don't have critical race theory, you think you have radicalism in your school because your school's doing social emotional learning, well, welcome to the party. Do you understand now what SEL is about? It's not about mental health. It's not about making your kid more holistic and sound. It's about the introduction of this kind of garbage into your kid's school. Think about it, Mom, please, for just one moment. When you hear that your school has gone to social emotional learning and the schools who deny critical race theory is there, brag about SEL. Brag about it. Listen to what the words sound like. Social emotional learning. Where in that rubric do you hear academics? Where in social emotional learning do you actually hear about schoolwork? The entire premise of your kid's new education is sociology. This is it. Pornography in the classroom, and emotional well-being, which means everything that aligns with radical progressive values.
This is just a mess, Duke. It's not just in the big cities. It's not just in the wacko states like Oregon. Forgive me if you're a conservative or a Christian in Oregon, but now it's in Wisconsin. It's in the small towns and communities as well.
It's a great coming of age book, but the actual words that are used and the sexually explicit nature of the book, to me, has no place being anywhere in a public school setting.
The graphic novel chronicles a biracial student as he comes out as gay to his peers and gets bullied. Bomia says the book contains sexual content, curse words, and offensive words.
I had to teach my son vocabulary out of this book. My son doesn't know what the word means and why it's not okay, and I had to go through this.
The school board met in May, and in a unanimous decision, they decided to not ban the book The Flamer, keeping it in the school library.
But what any curriculum should be is thoughtful, to give students something they don't already have, then make them into what we might call critical democratic citizens.
Michael Apple, a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, says the efforts to ban Flamer and other books like it are part of a well-organized campaign. He adds that Flamer is an award-winning book about acceptance and self-discovery.
When we look at the statistics of suicide among bullied kids, we're actually talking not just about censorship because some parents don't want that book. We're talking about kids' lives.
According to the American Library Association, there were 729 attempted bans last year to more than 1,500 books.
Listen to me, you professor, you quack. You can do everything you just said. Build up tolerance, expose kids to alternative lifestyles without the pornography. It is unnecessary. When you sit there from your professorial chair and you lecture us about democratic students, you mean that not in the sense of pro-democracy. You mean Democrat sheep. People following left-wing dogma. Again, sir, you can be incredibly respectful of alternative relationships without pornography, and you need to learn that lesson.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
Well, in this next story, there's a poll that came out, and no surprise, American trust in public education has plummeted to a second all-time low. There's a lot of interesting breakdowns in this. First of all, only 28% of Americans have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in the public education system, according to this Gallup poll. Let's look at this and just try to make sense of it here. So, America's confidence in U.S. public schools. Look at 1975. It was at 62%. 62% of Americans. And now go all the way over to the right there, follow the green line. I don't know what happened in 2019, 2020. Went up to 41, which is awful. But now it's all the way down to 28. And now in this one, well, Democrats clock in as having a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in the system. But that's 43% confidence, by the way. And that's a drop from 48 in 2020. Republican support plummeted from 34% all the way down to 14% in the same time frame. An interesting thing to look at, however, is independent voters. They dropped 9 points to just 29% support of the education system. Duke, we're hitting lows again, aren't we?
Yeah, throw that graph up again, please, Mike. Notice that 43% is well under 50% for Democrats. Let me repeat that. The Democrat Party, who is pushing all of this nonsense, this pornography, the sex, all of it, less than 50% of them, well less than 50% of them, don't like where the public schools are going. Take 15 points off of that for the independents and 15 more for the Republicans, which means an overwhelming majority of Americans, reject what's going on in the public schools. So my question, I apologize for being so surly today and this week, but I've had it with this argument. I can no longer sit by and just keep urging. When you see these numbers, okay, where's the corresponding exodus from these schools? Look, we should be at 30-40% evacuation right now, based on those numbers alone. If you're a concerned parent and you got your kids in public schools, you've got to turn that concern into action. The public schools are out to take your kids from you, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and of course, educationally. They're sacrificing an actual education of books for one of politics. How can you leave them there?
All right, before we go, let's take a little time to fill you in on some other stories we've been following, and let's start this time in New York, at New York University, where a $40,000 grant has been issued to find out why children favor whiteness and maleness over other identities. That's right. Thanks to the Department of Health and Human Services, valuable financial resources will now be used to, quote, uncover the development processes by which children acquire the belief that white males represent the default person, a pattern rooted in ideologies of androcentrism, centering the experiences of men, and ethnocentrism, centering the experience of white people, prevalent in the United States. Who needs to cure cancer when we face these hurdles every day? The NYU grant comes as part of a larger HHS initiative to inject equity at every level of the department with a strong emphasis on race and gender. Apparently, NYU has a history of tackling whiteness in America. In fact, earlier in this spring, the university offered a music course that used Taylor Swift to discuss whiteness and power in the pop music industry. Money well spent, I'm sure. Duke?
Give me the $40,000 and I will explain the problem, okay? Okay, here's the problem. Send me the check. If more black men grew up with their babies, stayed with them, maybe black masculinity would be something that kids model. But most African American men can't be bothered to stay with their families. So you wonder why white men who tend to stay with their kids a lot more, you think maybe that's the problem? Maybe that's why kids identify that way. And the answer, $40,000 worth? Hey, African American men, stay responsible parents. Stay at home with your kids, and you'll see those numbers change. It's not rocket science. I want my 40,000.
Well, now let's look at a new social psychology quarterly study that has found, ready, dog owners are big old racists. Yes, you heard that right. According to the study, dogs in animal shelters that have white names are adopted much faster than dogs with black names. According to this study, the correlations were largely concentrated around pit bulls, really, a breed that is stereotyped as dangerous and racialized as black. Of course, upon being triggered by the word racism, academics had to weigh in on Twitter. Timothy Welbeck, assistant professor of instruction at Temple University, said this, quote, "Why is everything about race? Because everything is about race." There's the answer from a professor. Chantal Haley, assistant professor of sociology at the University of Texas, Austin, said, quote, "Anti-blackness is so pervasive, it even expands to dog names." And Neff Walker, chief diversity officer at University of Massachusetts Amherst, said this, quote, "Fascinating research that supports the resiliency of racialized names and the pervasiveness of anti-blackness. Must read work." Duke, you're a dog lover just like me.
Without argument, white people adopt most of the dogs that are strays, period. And if white people are drawn to white names, it's because of that, right? And if you call that whiteness, if you call that some kind of a racial problem, maybe we again need to gin up the minority participation in adopting dogs, and maybe all this would go away. But you can't blame racism on people's choices when they're based on adopting a pet. It's nonsense, and it's typical leftist garbage.
Okay, let's get to the Babylon Bee headlines to see which one should be crowned number one this week. And let's start with Biden vows to help all minorities, whether they are black, yellow, or taco. Next, White House still searching for a Biden they can send out in public. Next, study shows U.S. fourth graders now gay at a 12th grade level. And next, Elon Musk unveils the Tesla Model H homeschooler van that will fit all his kids. And how about this one? Humans feeling strange compulsion to praise whoever created this. Duke, your favorite.
Without a doubt, fourth graders now gay at a 12th grade level, because that's not even satire. That's the one and only thing that the public schools seek to accomplish, and they've accomplished it.
You're right, and that's frightening. Good point. So that's going to wrap this segment up. More to come next time.
Once again, before we go, our classical Judeo-Christian K-12 school is wrapping up enrollment. Got a couple days left. July 22nd is the end. Go to freedomforschool.com. That's freedomforschool.com to get started. And my friends, education now more than ever.